White people come fuck stand that. Then the okay?
Oh, the minorities.
On that, yeah.
Oh, the minorities.
Yeah, the minority.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not a racist. You're not a racist.
No, I'm not a fucking racist.
Who is white in America? This video is not alarming to me as someone from New York. This person is either from Long Island, Staten Island, or Brooklyn, and most likely Italian, Russian, Polish, from any one of those groups. That matters because up until the 1960s and 70s, Italians, Russians, Jews, Poles, Greeks, and any other European immigrant from Eastern or Southern Europe were not considered white in America. And in fact, here is a photo of the KKK marching in New Jersey for the arrival of the new ethnic whites, as they were considered. Here's a picture of the KKK in Long Island marching against the rise in the ethnic whites. So how did the ethnic whites get absorbed into whiteness? There's one answer: racism. The abridged version to this story goes something like, there was an increased white population that was coming into New York City and the surrounding areas through Ellis Island. These ethnic whites, considered because they weren't the Anglo-Saxon Protestants, they dispersed between New York, Philadelphia, Boston, Chicago, Detroit, and several cities. At that same time, though, the Great Migration was happening from the South, where millions of Black Americans were leaving the South, coming to the North. And when they were coming to the North, they were interacting with those same white people who had been there prior. So those Protestant Anglo-Saxons convinced the Poles, the Russians, the Jews, the Irish to become white to go against Black people. So much so, the Irish gangs in Chicago burned down a Polish neighborhood and then told the Poles that Black Americans did it. And the Poles were like, well, we're not white, so why would we fight with you? But over time, when the perceived power of whiteness took hold and the perceived threat of Blackness taking over the city, these white people combined forces to be against Black people. So you have someone like this man in this video who was most likely Italian, whose grandparents most likely came through Ellis Island, and his grandparents came and they were not considered white, but by the time his mother was born and he was born, he was white. And with that new perceived whiteness and power came the chance to be racist. And if there's one thing we understand in this country, the lower position of power you have and you're white, your only perceived power is racism. You ask any New Yorker about Italians from Staten Island or white people on Long Island, even though we're one of the most democratic, progressive cities, there's still a lot of red. That's why, because these people, their whiteness is very new. It's no more than 2 or 3 generations that their whiteness is there. So they hold on to that whiteness. They have to be very protective of it because they were told stories about how they were not white.
That many of you are demanding that I speak out about what happened in Minneapolis to Alex Pretty. So here's my opinion. My opinion is that you don't want my opinion.
Nathaniel, please. Wrap it up. What an interesting use of free will and a disgusting display of privilege to respond to the murders of Alex Pretty, Renee Nicole Good, and Keith Porter Jr. by gaslighting people and saying, I just don't get into politics. But when Charlie Kirk was murdered, wasn't this you?
You know, some white folks never ceases to amaze me. But good thing is that at least the world is now getting to see white people for who they are. Because you can't tell me a grown-ass man just says that white Americans are the owners of the United States and the rest of the people are immigrants. White Americans comes first, if I didn't hear him wrong. And this all tells you their thinking. This all tells you the mentality in regards to the United States and how they perceive the United States and who belongs to the United States. To them, they believe that they are the owners, they're the rightful people, they're the indigenous people to the land of the United States. And I don't really think if some people have time to look into history or just read books, because you can definitely get some ignorance from his answers. But then this also shows you that the idea of America first. Is it America first or white America first? Something needs to be clarified, because the mentality that these people have, at least some of these people have, clearly shows you how they think and where they think. Because you can't tell me that he presumes that anybody else who is not white is an immigrant in the United States, to mean that They don't have any ties with the United States, but yet them as white people, they're the ones who like have, they're the ones who have the first hand when it comes to the United States. Probably you need some history and learn about all these things that are happening. This is just ignorance, first class ignorance. Brothers and sisters, this is really crazy, but what can I do? I'm gonna let you watch the video, and then I'll be back, and then we are going to like have a discussion in regards to this, because we need to talk about this and the psychology behind these people thinking like this. That's what I'm going to explain to you, because you might think that they are innocently doing this, but that's how they were indoctrinated to believe. So yeah, please let me know what you think about this. I'll be back with my thoughts and commentaries in regards to this. So keep watching.
This is not about politics. Those are opinions and ideologies. This is very much a battle of good and evil. And there is absolutely evil in the world.
Yikes on bikes. The selective outrage would be crazy if it wasn't coming from someone who looks like his parents are coslings. I don't... Y'all are really never beating the allegations, because why is your response in one situation, oh, I don't get into politics, but in the other one, it's, oh, this is clearly a battle between good and evil. And here's the thing, I said this before and I'll say it again, I'm not celebrating what happened to Charlie Kirk, because at the end of the day, it's just another example of the gun problem we have in this country. However, I'm also not going to act like what happened to him was not natural and logical consequences. And before y'all try to come at me for saying that, did y'all forget that in the book y'all claim to care about, but in reality only uses a weapon when it's beneficial for y'all? That Sky Daddy said in Matthew 26:52, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. Right. Charlie Kirk spread some of the most hateful and violent rhetoric, and he himself even said he felt like gun deaths were worth it to have the Second Amendment. And when his hate and violence came back like a boomerang and hit him in the neck, y'all were outraged. It was, oh, this isn't about politics, no one deserves to die for their beliefs. However, when people are standing up in the face of hate and using their constitutional rights to do so, and they're murdered for it, now all of a sudden, you don't get into politics. Very interesting use of free will. I'm gonna hold your hand with a napkin in between when I say this. The silence and outright refusal to call this bullshit out for what it is louder than you think, and the selective outrage and empathy tells us everything we need to know. Hope this helps. Peace and love. Talk to you later.
So here's my opinion. My opinion is that you don't want my opinion.
Look, I've seen several creators not want to give their opinion about certain things for whatever reason. It's not their lane or whatever, but I just want y'all to know where I stand at. It's always fuck ICE. And the reason why it's fuck ICE is not just because of what they're doing today in 2026, but ICE was built on and formed from the oppression of black people for generations. The church bombing, what the Klan did in this country. They've always worn masks and hoods. They used to just be white and pointy. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 used to force black people to carry around their free papers. That way they wouldn't be captured and brought back into bondage. So ICE has always been an entity. It's just went by different names. Know that this country was built on the oppression of people by European Americans, because white wasn't a term at the time. They only started using white so they could just use it as a caste system, so you could visually identify who was good enough to be an American citizen, U.S. citizen, or who was not good enough. It's always been a good old boys club. And I hate to break your heart about the ones that are like me, that are also socioeconomically oppressed, that grew up poor and grew up broke. But this club wasn't built for us neither. We were just supposed to be the foot soldiers to keep white supremacy at the forefront, to keep whiteness at the helm. At least we could be white. And I'm telling you that it's time that we've changed that. We should change that. Us, white folks, white men, white women too, but definitely the white fellas. We are upholding a system that does not benefit us. It does not help. So when you say that ICE is doing a good job, then you're also saying that slavery was a good thing. You're also saying that women should be subjugated to submissive roles in the house and they shouldn't get paid as much.
You're also saying you're also saying that billionaires deserve what they have. The rich and the wealthy and the elite, the owning class, deserve where they're at because they're morally just. And I'm telling you that that's an immoral statement. So let's work on that aspect of living, and then we can get somewhere.
I'm not a political commentator. I'm not incredibly well versed on politics.
I'm so tired of the utter obsession with politics.
Let me adjust the dial on the white translation here. They don't care. They want your money. They want your clicks. They want your follows. I need you guys to just come out and admit you're Republicans, okay? I also need you to come out and just admit that you don't give a fuck when black and brown people die or get kidnapped. And the thing that is so yikes about this is that it's not just that these people are too big of cowards to just come out and admit that they're MAGA while they say they're not political. Oh, I'm not political. Oh, really? Then why were you talking about Charlie Kirk? No, these people didn't even give a fuck when white people died in the form of Alex Preddy or Renee Good because that's how political they are. Both of these people made videos crying about Charlie Kirk, and then both made videos scolding people in their own audience for asking them to speak about ICE in Minnesota. And good for the people that did call them out in their own audience, but the sad reality is that for the most part, they're not gonna lose followers because their audience doesn't give a fuck either. They either don't give a fuck or they agree. They affirmatively agree with what's happening. I think a lot of times when we talk about racism and white supremacy, we talk about it in like a more outward, aggressive manner, understandably. But what's not talked about enough is just the racism of apathy. Like, so many white people just don't give a fuck. That's why these people are annoyed. They're annoyed that you're asking them to give a fuck. We didn't need to ask them to make videos about Charlie Kirk though, did we?
And I'm just going to shut you up right there because extremely contradictory, right? So back when you wanted to speak on Charlie Kirk, you specifically said yourself, people losing their lives is not political, right? Kids getting killed in schools is not political. But you then say that, oh, a political figure, Charlie Kirk, who I would say by no means was a political figure, died, and that nobody should have to witness their family member get killed online, executed online. Guess what? Alex Preddy had the same exact thing happen to him. And people are asking what your opinion is on it. And all of a sudden now, 5 months later, you have no opinions. Because the person who killed Charlie Kirk was more likely than not one of yours. Because the people who went in and shot people in schools, for the majority, are people that look like you, right? But now that people are denouncing somebody who you likely voted into office's actions, you don't want to speak up on it because it's too political. You're spineless. You're a useless human being if you can't speak up about things that matter. You are a mouthpiece for nobody. You regurgitate bullshit that you've read in books. You keep saying, I have my own original thoughts. I'm my own person. If you can't be a content creator, if you can't be original and speak about things that are impassion you, your platform is so unoriginal. You quote other people. You ramble out about bullshit you know nothing about. It's embarrassing to be able to sit there at your age, damn near 28, I believe, and say that I'm not going to say anything because you don't want me, because I don't want to, when your entire platform is saying shit that you don't really want to say. You say it because it makes you money. I'm sure if health and wellness never took off for you, you would have pivoted, right? But it did. And so that's what you speak about, because people decided, hey, I like that you talk about this, just talk about this. So there's somebody up there with their hands up your ass, puppeting your mouth, right? Nobody's ideas, nobody's thoughts, nobody's actions are original in this world, if we're being 100% honest. Your actions, your thoughts are a product of your environments and the people around you and what you read and etc. So because you don't care enough that other people are getting killed that are directly affected from directly affected by the actions that you and people like you have taken, you're not going to speak on it. It's embarrassing. It's oh I do what God tells me to do and what I'm inspired to by God. No, you don't. You do whatever makes you money. Respectfully.
You listen to me because I speak on what I am inspired and convicted to speak on.
So you're not inspired to speak out against what happened? That's an issue, babe. You should be very inspired to condemn that.
And I'm not a political commentator.
You're in the wellness sector and you don't think that's political? Huh.
I think murdering and killing people is wrong. Same thing I said about Charlie Kirk.
There it is. You spoke out about Charlie Kirk, but not this. I'm sure there's a reason for that, right?
Because I was shown the video of his unaliving against my will on Instagram while scrolling, and it messed with my head for days. And in order to become properly informed on this, I need to go watch the video of another human life being taken. I'm not going to do that.
Shit, oh my God. I would argue that this is just as big of a story as what happened to Charlie Kirk. And I'm going to be honest with you, I saw the video of both Renee Good and what happened to Alex more times than I saw anything about Charlie Kirk. So you're telling me that Charlie Kirk just happened to naturally come across your timeline, but these didn't. Why is your FYP like that? I'm assuming your FYP is like that because you are political, but it shows you one side of politics, right? It shows you the side of politics that would show you that, oh my God, Charlie Kirk, this amazing Christian, was murdered, but it won't show police violence. And I think I know why.
Because I believe it rots our soul, and the internet has totally desensitized us from the impact of that.
I agree with you on that because I feel like if we weren't desensitized by this would be huge fucking news and you would open your mouth. But what do I know? You're so fucking privileged, right? Because the people who sit there and be like, oh, I don't like to get political. I'm not a political person. They say this because right now the politics that are happening benefit and work for them. God, I wish most of us had that privilege.
Hello brothers and sisters, welcome back to the channel. I'm hoping that you're doing great from wherever you're watching me from. As you know, I'm your host and presenter Genetic Stories. Let's have a chat. Let's have a talk in regards to this. First of all, I'd like to say that when a white man, publicly an influencer, states that white people come first, then immigrants, especially during ID exchange, this all reveals more than a personal opinion because it exposes a deeply rooted ideological framework about belonging, ownership, and national identity in the United States. Because this kind of statement is not simply about immigration policy. It reflects an assumption that whiteness is the default identity of America and that everyone else exists in relation to it. So the phrasing places white people outside of the immigration category entirely, as if they are naturally native to the land, while other groups must justify their presence. So this framing is powerful because language shapes who is perceived as legitimate and who is treated as conditional. So to them, white Americans are the legitimate owners of the America's land, while the rest, you are just people who came. You come next. You are not like the first people in the United States. And that tells you the perception, the psychology that this group of people have towards and other groups of people. Probably needs to know that we have indigenous people to the land. We have Black Americans who are also indigenous to the land. Black Americans who were here before even the Columbus. And this also answers you the question why it is so much difficult for you to see a black person being deported from the United States, because history shows it like directly. And this is just what you need to understand. This is just what you need to know, right? Another thing is the idea that white people are not immigrants, but others are, rests on historical distortion. That was a historical distortion that was done in regards to that, because the United States is a settler colonial nation, meaning that most white Americans, descendants from Europe, immigrants who arrived centuries ago. Yet, over time, whiteness became normalized as American, while non-white identities were frozen in a perpetual immigrant status, even when those communities have been present for generations. So by calling other groups immigrants while excluding white people from the label, this influencer is asserting that hierarchy. It's asserting a hierarchy of belonging, right? Whiteness as foundational members of the nation and everyone else as guests or outsiders. That's just generally what he meant. And I think it's important for you to understand that we have people who are foundationally been to the United States, and these are a group of people. They have witnessed, they have seen, the growth of the United States. They have played a part in making the United States be what it is today. And so it is so ironical just seeing a group of people or a person who is out of his mind goes out and just says that, we Americans are the owners of the land. The rest of the people, they are immigrants, right? It's so diabolical. So this mindset also erases indigenous peoples entirely, because if white people are framed as the rightful owners of vast members of America, then the existence and sovereignty of native nations are conveniently pushed out of the conversation. So the irony is striking. The only truly indigenous people to the land are Native Americans, yet they are often marginalized. While descendants of European settlers speaks as if they inherited the country by default. So this rhetoric move allows white identity to occupy a position of permanence and authority that, if historically did not earn through indigeneity, but through conquest and lawmaking. That's how diabolical and that's how crazy this is. Because this is a dangerous mindset. This is a mindset that may push people do some things that are not great. Because as a black person, as the indigenous people of to the lands of the United States, you played a significant role. But yet somebody who doesn't understand anything just comes out and just says that, you're an immigrant. You didn't play any part in this. So, referring to non-white group as immigrants functioned as a political and social gatekeeping tool, because it certainly implies that citizenship, rights, and loyalty are conditional for these groups, even when they are born in the country. A black American whose ancestors were forcibly brought to the US, or an Asian American family that has lived there for a century, can still be framed as less American than a white person whose family arrived later. So this creates a hierarchy where whiteness equals to full membership, while others must constantly prove their patriotism, productivity, or gratitude at the same time. So the phrase, white people came first, also reflects an entitlement to priority, socially, economically, and politically, because it suggests that resources, safety, and representation should be allocated according to racial ranking rather than equal citizenship. So historically, this belief has shaped policies such as immigration quotas, housing laws, voting restrictions, and labor access, all designed to preserve white dominance. So even today, similar language resurfaces in cultural debates, revealing how whole hierarchies adapt rather than disappear. Right. So what makes this rhetoric particularly dangerous is how how normalized it has become in a certain media spaces, because influencers can frame these ideas as common sense or protective culture, or putting our own first, without naming the racial assumption underneath. So by doing so, they avoid accountability while reinforcing the belief that America has racial order. The normalization trains audiences to see inequality as unnatural and resistance as unreasonable, especially when marginalized groups challenge exclusionary narratives. Right? So, this way of thinking also explains why some white Americans react defensively to discuss about racism or historical injustice. Because if one believes that they are the original or rightful owners of the nation, then critiques of systemic inequality can feel like personal attack rather than a structural analysis, right? So acknowledging that America was built through exclusion and exploitation threatens the moral legitimacy of that perceived ownership. And as a result, calling others immigrants becomes a way to protect status, not just to describe migration. So that's how this all has been playing. So the statement reveals how national identity in the US has been racially coded rather than universally defined. So by positioning white people as the core and others as secondary, the influencer is just echoing one thing: a long-standing ideology that equates Americanness with whiteness. So that's just it. So tell me, brothers and sisters, what you feel and see about this. I'm really appreciative if you watched and reached this point. But at the end of the day, I'm hoping to see you on my next video. But until then, peace, love, and harmony. So